The roar of the crowd was a living, breathing entity, a tidal wave of adoration that washed over Diddy as he stepped onto the massive, glittering stage. Pyrotechnics exploded, lights pulsed to the beat of 1,000 subwoofers, and the collective energy of tens of thousands of fans pulsed through the stadium. This was Diddy's domain, his empire. He was the undisputed king of the night, a global icon who had built a brand on defiance, swagger, and an almost supernatural ability to command attention. Tonight, in a major international city, a city that, ironically, was a hub for global capital and power, a city that often overlooked the struggles of distant nations and their emerging leaders, he was celebrating a milestone, a new album, a triumph of his enduring influence. The air crackled with anticipation, the very atmosphere a testament to his curated persona of untouchable success. Yet, a subtle, almost imperceptible tension simmered beneath the surface of the grand spectacle. Whispers had circulated in the days leading up to the concert, a discordant note in the symphony of hype. Rumors that Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the unyielding, revolutionary leader of Burkina Faso, had issued a direct, albeit highly unusual and audacious, challenge. Traoré, whose defiance of Western economic and political pressure had earned him hero status across much of Africa and among Pan-Africanist movements globally, was not one to miss an opportunity to assert African dignity and sovereignty on any platform available. He had, through channels that bypassed traditional, slow-moving diplomacy and direct government-to-government overtures, made an almost unheard-of demand. If Diddy truly wished to maintain any semblance of positive standing within the increasingly assertive African sphere, a market Diddy was keen to expand into, his concert, broadcast globally and watched by millions, must acknowledge the growing strength and self-determination of African nations. Specifically, the national anthem of Burkina Faso, Un Seul Nuit, One Single Night, was to be played at a designated moment, a symbolic gesture of respect and recognition for a continent reclaiming its narrative, a deliberate act of cultural assertion in the face of perceived Western arrogance. Diddy, in his characteristic hubris, had summarily dismissed it. Play an anthem? At my show? This is about my music, my brand, my legacy. He'd reportedly scoffed to his team, lounging in a private jet, completely detached from the geopolitical shifts he was being asked to acknowledge. He saw it as a ridiculous, even insulting, demand from a relatively unknown leader in a small, landlocked country he probably couldn't even point to on a map with any certainty. His legal troubles in the West were mounting, creating a siege mentality around him. He was the one under pressure, not some African president who dared to challenge him. He believed his power, his influence, his sheer celebrity transcended such trivialities that the world revolved around his whims. His lawyers and PR team, already scrambling to manage the multi-front domestic crises he faced, had advised caution, warning that ignoring such a direct request from a sovereign nation, however small it seemed to him, could have unforeseen diplomatic and public relations repercussions. But Diddy, ever the provocateur, ever convinced of his own untouchability, had decided to double down on his defiance. He thought he could leverage his global platform to subtly undermine Traoré, to make an example of the African leader, to show who truly held sway in the international cultural landscape, and perhaps even send a message to other African nations contemplating similar demands. The concert was a spectacle of curated rebellion and calculated cool, a sensory overload designed to overwhelm and enthrall. Hit after hit blasted through the speakers, each track a testament to Diddy's Midas touch, Diddy's signature ad-libs echoing through the arena, amplified to stadium-shaking levels. The crowd was a pulsating sea of flashing phones, roaring lyrics back at him, a unified choir of devotion. He moved with the effortless charisma of a man who owned the stage, who owned the moment, every gesture choreographed for maximum impact, every glance a carefully constructed piece of his larger-than-life persona. His ego, fed by decades of unbridled success and adoration, swelled with each thunderous cheer. Then, halfway through the set, a strange, almost unnatural silence fell over the music. The beat, which had been driving the collective frenzy, slowly faded. The pulsating lights dimmed slightly, casting the stage in a softer, more reflective glow. Diddy, bathed in a single spotlight, raised a hand to the audience, a practiced gesture of command. This was usually the moment for a heartfelt dedication, a powerful spoken word interlude, a surprise guest appearance that would send shockwaves through social media. The crowd leaned in, expectant, ready for the next carefully orchestrated act of showmanship. Yo, yo, yo! Diddy boomed, his voice resonating through the stadium's powerful sound system, crackling with a defiant energy. I'm hearing a lot of noise out there, a lot of chatter, about what I should or shouldn't do. About who I should or shouldn't recognize. He chuckled, a dismissive, arrogant sound that grated against the hushed expectation of the crowd. Let me be clear. This is my stage. This is my moment. And we play by my rules. A ripple of confused murmurs went through the crowd. Some cheered, thinking it was just Diddy being Diddy, asserting his dominance as a musical titan, a familiar act of showmanship. Others, however, felt a prickle of unease, sensing a departure from the usual script. He continued, his voice growing louder, more defiant, laced with a contempt that was thinly veiled. Some people out there think they can tell me what to do, what to play. Some little country, somewhere. Talking about anthems and all that. We don't do that here. We global. We beyond borders. We play for the world. This ain't no political rally. This is entertainment. He threw his hands up, a grand gesture of ultimate dismissal, the very embodiment of Western cultural hegemony dismissing the legitimate demands of a sovereign nation. The lights flared back up, ready for the next track, the moment of defiance seemingly complete, his authority reasserted. But the next track never came. The carefully curated sonic landscape of Diddy's empire was about to be irrevocably altered. Instead, a different sound began to filter through the massive stadium speakers, a sound that cut through the lingering echoes of Diddy's arrogance. It was subtle at first, a faint, rhythmic drumbeat, unfamiliar to most of the Western audience, yet undeniably African in its deep, resonant cadence. Then, a strong, clear melody, carried by traditional instruments, the balafon, the kora, the djem, began to swell, layered with a distinct, soulful horn section. It was the national anthem of Burkina Faso, Unsolnut, One Single Night, not as a solemn, formal, almost mournful recording often heard at diplomatic events, but a powerful, almost defiant, instrumental rendition, vibrant and alive, resonating with a spirit of resilience and awakening. The music was unmistakable, vibrant, and utterly out of place for a Diddy concert, a stark, deliberate intrusion into his meticulously controlled environment. The crowd, moments before a unified force pulsing with Diddy's energy, began to murmur, to crane their necks, their expressions shifting from anticipation to bewilderment. Confusion turned to a growing sense of unease, then to an almost palpable silence as the gravity of the moment slowly dawned on them. Diddy, still basking in the glow of his defiant declaration, his face still holding that arrogant smirk, felt the shift immediately. The familiar control was gone. He looked frantically at the sound technician in the wings, then at his DJ, his face contorting from confusion to disbelief, then to raw, unadulterated rage. What the hell is this? Cut it. Cut the damn music. Now, he roared into his mic, his voice echoing over the swelling, defiant anthem, his words now sounding desperate, hollow. But the music continued, growing louder, drowning out his protests, a powerful, unstoppable tide. The stage lights, instead of focusing on Diddy, began to shift, casting a diffuse, almost eerie glow across the entire stadium, subtly shifting the focus from the performer to something far larger. Then, projected onto the massive screens behind the stage, which moments before had displayed dazzling graphics of Diddy's brand logos and album art, a new image appeared, sharp and undeniable. It was a still image of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, standing resolutely, his military fatigues stark against a plain, almost austere background, his gaze direct, unblinking, filled with an unflinching resolve. And beneath him, in bold, stark text, was a message, appearing simultaneously in French, English, and several major local African languages, asserting a universal truth. Burkina Faso is not a footnote. Our sovereignty is not a game. Our dignity is not negotiable. When you step on our soil, or speak of our nation, you will respect our identity. You dismissed our anthem. Now you will listen to our voice. This is the new Africa. The message remained on screen, unwavering, burning itself into the minds of the audience. As the anthem continued to play, its powerful, often defiant, melody now filling every corner of the stadium, silencing all other sound. The crowd was no longer cheering or dancing. They were silent, mesmerized, and deeply uncomfortable, witnessing a live, audacious act of geopolitical assertion. The spectacle had turned on its head. Diddy was no longer the showman, but an unwitting participant in a larger, more significant performance. Diddy, microphone still clutched in his hand, stood frozen on stage. His fury was palpable, a raw, uncontrolled emotion, but it was useless against the force that had usurped his stage. His security detail, usually a formidable wall of muscle and efficiency, seemed hesitant, confused, looking to each other for guidance that wasn't coming. He looked out at the audience, not seeing adoring fans, but thousands of bewildered, increasingly aware faces, their phones now recording not his performance, but his humiliation. He tried to speak again, to shout, to reclaim control, but his voice was utterly swallowed by the insistent, triumphant notes of the anthem. Then, from the side of the stage, a contingent of men in dark suits, unidentifiable but clearly authoritative, moved swiftly and purposefully. They weren't Diddy's security. Their presence was disciplined, almost military in its precision. They moved with a quiet, undeniable purpose, their faces grim, their movements synchronized. One of them, a stern-faced individual with eyes that brooked no argument, approached Diddy directly. Without a word, without a moment of hesitation, he reached out and gently, but firmly, took the microphone from Diddy's hand, disarming him of his primary tool of command. Mr. Combs, the man's voice, though quiet, was amplified through a hidden earpiece, audible only to Diddy, cutting through the anthem's swell. The president's message is clear. Your performance has concluded. This stage is now otherwise occupied. Diddy stumbled back, shocked, genuinely caught off guard. What? Who are you? Get off my stage. This is my show, he yelled, his voice now raw, unamplified, swallowed by the national anthem still thundering through the stadium, a cruel irony. He thrashed, trying to break free, desperation etched on his face. But it was too late. The men, moving with synchronized precision and an almost unnerving efficiency, began to escort him, firmly but without aggression, towards the backstage exit. Diddy struggled, cursing under his breath, trying to pull away, to regain a foothold, but their grip was unyielding, their purpose undeniable. He was being removed from his own concert, in front of a global audience, while the very anthem he had dismissed and ridiculed played as his unwitting soundtrack of humiliation. The final, devastating humiliation. As he was led away, the screens behind him shifted. The image of Traoré dissolved, replaced by sweeping, majestic drone footage of Burkina Faso, its vibrant, bustling markets filled with resilient people, its ancient, towering baobab trees symbolizing endurance, its vast, fertile lands stretching towards the horizon, its determined people working the land, and even panoramic shots of its gold mines, rich with the resources Diddy had sought to exploit. And over it all, the anthem continued, a powerful, unwavering declaration of national pride and sovereignty, a living testament to a nation's soul. The message was unmistakable. While one empire was crumbling in the spotlight of its own making, another was rising, asserting its presence with undeniable force, a new paradigm of power unfolding before the world's eyes. The crowd in the stadium remained in stunned silence, witnessing not just a concert interrupted, but a geopolitical statement unfold before their eyes. The air of celebration had evaporated, replaced by a charged atmosphere of confusion, curiosity, and for many, a dawning realization of a different global power dynamic, one where the rules of engagement were being rewritten by unlikely players. Many in the audience, having never heard of Burkina Faso before, were now profoundly aware of its existence and its defiant leader. The incident, instantly dubbed the Anthem Shutdown, or Traoré's mic drop, exploded across social media and global news channels. Initially, confusion reigned. Was it a prank? A highly elaborate publicity stunt by Diddy himself? A technical glitch of epic proportions? But as the raw, unedited footage of Diddy being escorted off stage, screaming unheard protests over the triumphant Burkinabe anthem, went viral, spreading like wildfire across every platform, the truth became undeniable, its implications chillingly clear. The international media, always hungry for drama and a compelling narrative, quickly picked up on the story. While some cynical commentators dismissed it as an audacious stunt by Traoré, a populist leader seeking attention, many seasoned political analysts and geopolitical experts recognized the profound, deliberate significance. It wasn't just a celebrity being humbled, it was a carefully calculated, powerful act of defiance by an African leader against centuries of Western cultural dominance, economic leverage, and patronizing attitudes. It was a clear message that the days of passive acceptance were over. Traoré's office, notably, issued no immediate statement. Their message had been delivered on the world stage, amplified by Diddy's own celebrity, broadcast through the very channels Diddy commanded. The very silence from Ouagadougou spoke volumes, reinforcing the calculated impact of the unexpected intervention. It allowed the global conversation to unfold organically, letting the raw footage and the stark images do the talking, ensuring the maximum possible reverberation without direct engagement. This strategic non-commentary amplified the mystique and power of the action. Diddy's team, in full crisis management mode, initially tried to spin it as a security incident or a misunderstanding, blaming technical issues or overzealous event staff. But the undeniable footage of Diddy's defiant words, followed by the seamless, professional integration of the anthem and the clear, unambiguous message on screen, made their desperate attempts at damage control look ludicrous, even pathetic. The public, already skeptical of Diddy due to his mounting legal troubles and growing accusations of misconduct, found little sympathy for his plight. The incident inadvertently fueled the narrative that he was out of control, not just domestically, but now globally, an arrogant figure whose power was finally being challenged. The backlash was swift and multifaceted, extending far beyond public opinion. For many in the African diaspora and on the continent itself, Traoré became an even greater hero, a symbol of a rising, unapologetic Africa. His audacious move was seen as a symbolic reclaiming of dignity, a powerful rebuke to centuries of condescension, a validation of their own pride and identity. Social media platforms overflowed with praise for Traoré, celebrating his courage, his strategic brilliance, and his fearless stand. The Burkinabe anthem, once obscure to many, was now a global symbol of defiance, a melody of resistance. Music producers began sampling it, DJs played it in clubs as a revolutionary statement, and activists adopted it as a rallying cry, spreading its message of sovereignty and self-respect. For Diddy, the consequences were far-reaching and financially crippling. Beyond the immediate public humiliation, the incident had tangible repercussions that hit him where it hurt most, his empire. Brands began to quietly distance themselves, initiating reviews of their associations, already wary of his mounting legal battles. Endorsement deals, once flowing freely, dried up. Investors, who had once seen him as a golden touch, a guaranteed return on investment, now saw him as a toxic liability, erratic, arrogant, and seemingly incapable of reading the room on an international scale, creating diplomatic incidents on his own stage. His carefully cultivated image of the ultimate power player, the shrewd businessman who always won, was severely tarnished, not by legal charges in a court of law, but by a perceived lack of respect and an epic miscalculation of geopolitical currents and the unwavering resolve of a new kind of African leader. His attempts to secure lucrative deals in other African nations, already challenging due to Traoré's influence, became virtually impossible. No nation, particularly those inspired by Traoré's burgeoning Pan-Africanist stance and anti-corruption drive, wanted to be associated with someone who had so publicly disrespected a fellow African leader and the very concept of African sovereignty. The irony was brutal, almost poetic. Diddy, who built an empire on controlling narratives and projecting an image of untouchable power, had been utterly stripped of that control on his own stage by a man he had dismissed as insignificant. He had been a puppet in a larger, more sophisticated geopolitical statement, orchestrated by a leader he had foolishly underestimated. The message was clear, delivered with a cold, undeniable force. There was a new global order emerging, one where assumed power and historical privilege were being challenged by nations asserting their sovereignty with uncompromising force, where cultural respect was a prerequisite for engagement, not an option. The Anthem shutdown served as a stark reminder to other global celebrities, multinational corporations, and political figures. The world was changing. Africa was no longer a passive recipient of Western dictates, nor was it a mere resource provider to be exploited with impunity. It was a continent rising, with leaders who were acutely aware of their worth, their history, and their undeniable right to self-determination. And they were willing to use any platform, even a hip-hop concert in a distant city, to make that undeniable truth known, to assert their presence and their power in the global arena. Diddy, forced to cancel the remainder of his international tour due to unforeseen circumstances, a euphemism for the public relations nightmare and diplomatic fallout, effectively vanished from the public eye for a period, his legal battles becoming the sole, inescapable focus. The roar of the crowd, once his lifeblood, his oxygen, was replaced by the cold silence of legal chambers and the distant, echoing melody of an anthem he had tried and failed to silence. He had been kicked out of his own concert, yes, but more significantly, he had been forcefully removed from a position of assumed global authority, taught a humbling, irreversible lesson by a leader who knew that true power lay not in celebrity or accumulated wealth, but in principle, unwavering resolve, and an uncompromising commitment to one's nation. The mic had truly been dropped, and it wasn't Diddy holding it. It was Captain Ibrahim Traoré, whose quiet, resolute defiance had reverberated across the globe, a single night that changed the rhythm of global power and cemented a new, unyielding standard for respectful engagement with African nations.